Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're turning our focus to a place everyone knows or thinks they know, instantly recognizable, right? Times Square in New York City.
Absolutely. That neon glow, the crowds,
hmm
it's iconic.
It really is. But, beyond that spectacle, for those of you who really love getting under the skin of famous places, there's just a ton of surprising history packed in there.
Oh, definitely. We've gathered some great sources to really explore its story.
So think of this as your maybe inside track to understanding Times Square beyond just the bright lights. We want to give you a quick but, thorough look.
Exactly. We'll look at how it evolved, some key moments, and maybe reveal a few things that, well, even people who've been there might not know.
Okay, so let's jump right in with something basic but maybe a bit confusing. The name and, well, the shape. It's called Times Square.
Right. But it wasn't always. Before 1904, this whole intersection, this area, was actually known as Long Acre Square.
Long Acre Square. Okay,
Yeah.
so what changed?
Well, the big change was Adolph S. Ochs. He was the publisher of the New York Times. He made this really bold move, relocating the newspaper's headquarters to a brand new skyscraper right there between Broadway and 7th Avenue, 42nd and 43rd.
The Times Tower. And I read he was pretty proud of that building, wasn't he? Didn't just see it as offices.
No, not at all. He really saw it as a statement. He actually called it the first successful effort in New York to give architectural beauty to a skyscraper. So, quite ambitious.
And that move, that building, was enough to rename the whole area.
Pretty much. In his honor, the city renamed Long Acre Square to Times Square in 1904. But here's the other thing you mentioned, the shape. It's not actually a square.
Right. It always feels more like, well, two triangles smashed together, almost.
That's a great way to put it. It's technically an intersection where Broadway cuts diagonally across 7th Avenue. That creates what people often call a bow tie shape.
A bow tie, yeah, I can see that.
But interestingly, within that bow tie, there is a specific named square, the northern part.
Ah, okay. That must be Duffy Square. Between, 46 and 47?
Exactly, Duffy Square. It's named after Father Francis P. Duffy. He was a very famous and respected chaplain, especially for his service with the Fighting 69th Regiment in World War I.
A war hero chaplain. Makes sense.
Yeah, the square was dedicated to him in 1939. And you'll find statues there, too. One of Father Duffy himself, which went up in 37, and also one of George M. Cohan.
The Yankee Doodle dandy guy. Makes sense for the theater district. And isn't that where the TKTS booth is?
That's the spot. The famous discount ticket booth has been there since, its early days, back in 1973. It's a fixture now.
So going back a bit further then, before the Times, before the theaters,
Yeah.
what was this area like? You mentioned Long Acre Square, but even before that?
Well, you have to picture something much more rural, almost. There was actually a stream nearby, the Minetta Brook, and a lot of the land was just farmland,
Farmland. Right there. Hard to imagine.
isn't it? And interestingly, it was also a major center for horse trading. John Jacob Astor had his American Horse Exchange there. Big business back then.
Wow. Horses to billboards. That's quite the shift. So how did it become the heart of the theater district?
That really started happening around World War I. Theaters started moving uptown, looking for, maybe cheaper land in a new central hub.
Yeah.
Times Square, or Long Acre Square as it still was partly then, was perfectly positioned.
And that's when it started getting really bright, right? The whole Great White Way thing.
Exactly. That nickname is directly tied to the explosion of electric lights and advertising signs. There was this advertising guy, O.J. Good, around 1901, who really pushed the potential of these massive electric displays.
He saw the future, basically.
He really did. And by about 1910, the area was so famously, brilliantly lit at night that the Great White Way just stuck. It became, the symbol of New York's energy and nightlife.
Must have been incredible to see back then, like
Yeah.
nothing else.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just theaters. Big fancy hotels like the Astor and the Knickerbocker opened up, restaurants too. It became a real destination.
What really fueled all that growth, though? Just the theaters moving?
Well, the theaters were huge, but maybe the biggest factor was transportation. When the IRT Subway line opened in 1905, stopping right there at 42nd Street, it was a total game changer.
Ah, connectivity. Makes sense.
Suddenly, huge numbers of people could get there easily. Then you had elevated train lines, bus routes. They all converged on Times Square.
Yeah.
It became this massive transit hub which just fed the whole entertainment machine.
Okay, so it booms, becomes this entertainment center, transit hub. But Times Square's story isn't just like upward trajectory, is it? It had some rough patches, too.
Oh, absolutely. Its history mirrors the city's ups and downs. But even through changes, some traditions endured. Think about New Year's Eve.
Right, the ball drop, that started way back, didn't it?
It did. Adolph Ochs started the tradition, actually, to celebrate the opening of his Times Tower back at the end of 1904. The first ball drop was a few years later, 1907. Just a simple iron and wood ball with 100 light bulbs.
Wow. Compared to now? And didn't they stop it during the war?
They did. During World War II, for 2 years, 42 and 43, there was no ball drop because of wartime blackouts. But people still gathered. They had a minute of silence, followed by chimes. Shows how important it had become.
It really does. And it wasn't just symbolic, right? It had a physical connection across the country, too.
Yeah, that's a cool piece of history. Times Square was the official eastern end, the starting point for the Lincoln Highway.
The first coast-to-coast road.
Exactly. Set up in 1913, running all the way to San Francisco, is a huge deal for connecting the country by car. There's actually a marker there now put up in 2009 commemorating that.
But then things started to change. The mid to late 20th century, the image got a lot grittier.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. From the maybe late 60s through the 80s, Times Square went through a serious decline. It became known for, well, sleaze. Lots of adult movie theaters, peep shows, crime became a real issue.
I've heard descriptions like West 42nd Street being called the sleaziest block in America.
That was a common description in the 80s, yeah. It was a really rough, dangerous place. A complete contrast to the Great White Way image.
So what turned it around? Because today it feels so different, very tourist-focused, families everywhere.
The big push for revitalization really kicked into high gear in the mid-1990s under Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. There was a major effort to clean it up.
How did they do that?
It was a multi-pronged approach. Increased police presence, definitely, closing down the pornographic theaters and adult businesses, and, crucially, attracting different kinds of businesses, more tourist-friendly attractions, restaurants, mainstream stores.
Wasn't Disney involved somehow?
Yes, that was actually a huge turning point. The Walt Disney Company came in and restored the historic New Amsterdam Theater. That was seen as a major vote of confidence. It encouraged other big names, like Madame Tussauds Wax Museum and AMC Theaters, to invest in the area too. New hotels and office buildings followed.
And it worked. I mean, the crowds now are just immense.
Unbelievable numbers. It's consistently ranked as one of the world's most visited tourist spots. Estimates around 50 million visitors a year.
50 million.
Yeah. And on any given day, you could have, say, 250,000 to 300,000 people walking through. On really busy days, it can go up to, like, 460,000 pedestrians.
That's staggering. And the subway station there must be packed.
Oh, it is. Times Square 42nd Street is always one of the busiest, if not the busiest stations in the whole New York City subway system. Hundreds of thousands of people passing through daily.
All those people. That led to the idea of closing parts off to cars, right? The pedestrian plazas. I remember that being controversial.
It was initially. Some businesses were definitely worried about losing traffic, deliveries, customers driving in. The first attempt was pretty basic. They just used those temporary plastic lawn chairs.
Ah, yeah, I remember those. Looked a bit strange.
It did. But the data actually showed it was working. Fewer accidents involving pedestrians and cars. Fewer people dangerously walking in the street. More foot traffic overall. So Mayor Bloomberg announced in 2010 they'd make the plazas permanent.
And then they did the proper reconstruction.
Right. Starting around 2010, they ripped it all up and put in the custom granite pavers, the permanent benches, made it look much more substantial. That whole project wrapped up just before New Year's Eve 2016, including adding security bollards.
But even with the plazas, managing that many people and all the activity must be tough. I remember the issues with costumed characters and the desnudas.
Yeah, that became a whole thing. The costume characters aggressively asking for tips, the topless women painted in body paint, the desnudas. It wasn't technically illegal, most of it, but it created this kind of chaotic, sometimes uncomfortable atmosphere for visitors.
So what did the city do?
Well, in 2016, they tried to manage it better by creating designated zones. You have pedestrian flow zones where you're not supposed to stop or loiter to keep people moving, and then specific activity zones where the costume characters and performers are supposed to stay.
Trying to create some order out of the chaos.
Essentially, yeah, it's an ongoing challenge in such a unique space.
It's not just New Year's Eve anymore, though, is it? There are other big events there now.
That's true. It hosts quite a few things. Since 2002, they've had this huge outdoor yoga event called Mind Over Madness on the summer solstice. Thousands of people doing yoga right in the middle of Times Square.
Yoga in Times Square, that sounds intense.
It's definitely a sight. And since 2009, they also do a Valentine's Day thing. They have a competition each year for architects to design a big heart sculpture that gets installed.
Okay, so with all these people, events, the general crush Safety, especially pedestrian safety, has got to be a huge concern for anyone visiting.
Absolutely paramount. It sounds basic, but the advice is crucial. Use the crosswalks. Always. Wait for the walk signal. Don't just dart out.
Look both ways, like your mom told you.
Exactly. Even with the signal, look both ways. And maybe most importantly today, put the phone away when you're crossing. Avoid distractions like headphones. Just be aware.
Jaywalking must be tempting there, but probably a bad idea.
A really bad idea. NYC has a lot of pedestrian injuries, sadly, and Times Square is just inherently risky because of the sheer volume of people and traffic. Just don't do it.
So besides the official advice, what are some street smart tips people share online, maybe on Reddit or travel blogs, for navigating Times Square?
Yeah, you see a lot of recurring advice. Number one is almost always don't try to drive there. Just don't. Public transport or walking is the way to go.
Okay, good tip. What else?
Be aware that the shops and restaurants right in Times Square are often way overpriced. Walk just a few blocks away, you'll likely find better deals and maybe more authentic food.
The tourist trap premium.
Pretty much. Also, learn to politely but firmly say no thanks. Or just ignore people trying to aggressively hand you things, like CDs or overly pushy panhandlers. Sometimes those are scams.
Walk with purpose.
Definitely walk with purpose. Look like you know where you're going, even if you're just looking around.
Yeah.
And always, always be aware of your surroundings. Crowded places are prime spots for pickpockets.
So keep your valuables secure. Bag in front.
Yes. Secure bag, maybe a crossbody one worn in front. Keep wallets out of back pockets. Be cautious of street vendors shelling tickets, often better to buy from official sources. Basically, trust your instincts. If something feels weird or unsafe, just walk away.
And technology can help too, right? Maps and stuff.
For sure. Use Google Maps or Apple Maps for navigation. Get the MTA app for subway times and info. Maybe use a location sharing app if you're meeting people.
Good practical stuff. What about accessibility? Is Times Square manageable for people with disabilities?
There are efforts. The Times Square Alliance, which manages the area, does provide things like ASL interpretation, assisted listening devices, and accessible seating at the events they produce.
What about just getting around or finding restrooms?
That can still be challenging in such a crowded, older part of the city, but there are resources like the Got2Go map online or checking the NYC public restroom layer on Google Maps, which can help locate accessible bathrooms and provide details about them.
And amidst all the advertising, there's actually art appearing too.
Yeah, that's a cool recent development. They're increasingly using those massive digital billboards for actual digital art exhibitions, not just ads. It adds another sort of cultural layer to the visual overload.
It really seems like Times Square sparks debate, even among tourists. Should you stay there? Is it the real New York?
It definitely does. You know, a lot of New Yorkers avoid it like the plague because it's just so crowded and intense. But you have to admit, for a first-time visitor, it is convenient, centrally located, and has that undeniable energy.
So maybe visit, experience it, but don't only stay there.
That's probably good advice, yeah. Experience the spectacle, see a show, but then definitely get out and explore other neighborhoods, the Village, Brooklyn, Harlem, to get a broader feel for what New York City is really like.
So wrapping this up, it's clear Times Square is way more complex than just flashing lights and crowds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Its journey is pretty incredible, isn't it? From, farmland and horse trading to this global symbol of entertainment and commerce constantly reinventing itself.
Yeah, that constant change seems key. Underneath all the glitz, there's this deep, layered history.
Which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? It leads to a final thought for you, the listener. Given this history of nonstop transformation, what could Times Square possibly look like in another 100 years?
What new technologies or social changes or, cultural shifts will shape this place next? It's kind of mind-boggling to think about.
It really is. And while you ponder that future, maybe it inspires you to go explore some of those other amazing New York neighborhoods we mentioned, each with its own unique story.